it's so useful. Then how do we let these people take that guard down? How do we gently introduce it? What can we do in practice when we are on the job? We're stressed. There are so many priorities, but we know we have this nugget that we validated. We run tests, so the maths is solid. Mm-hmm. We only need to get the right people to act on it. What do we need to change our mindset? Do we need to make a shift? Is there a framework we can follow? What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that a lot of people like to do is they do the data dump, right? Here's all of the information. Here's everything that I looked at, and what we don't realize is we're looking through the lens of the curse of knowledge, right? We look at that information. We've been blessed with an insight, and we see it so clearly in that information that we're sharing, but we don't realize, we don't step away from that and look at it from their perspective and say, they haven't spent hours or days or weeks in the data like we have. They may not have a full context of everything that we've looked at and the full meaning behind the numbers. And so I always kind of say we need to shift from that exploratory approach to an explanatory one. And that shift is, and that's really, when I get asked, what is the biggest challenge that you see with data storytelling, it really comes back to that people don't make that shift. They don't navigate that chasm between exploratory, looking at the numbers, analyzing it, exploring the data, and then figuring out, I need to change how I communicate that information to others because they haven't spent all the time. They don't have all the context like we have. How can I bring them up to speed and help them understand a problem in way less time than it took me or you to analyze the problem and come up with an answer? And so, it's really about picking and choosing what goes into the story. How can I make it into, following a structure so that I can structure my ideas, structure the findings in a way that's going to connect with people and help them to understand it, and then bring out the key insight using visuals and charts that are going to help people to really see what I see. That's one of the challenges, is that people, when they look at the charts and the data after they've spotted an insight, they can look past the noise in the charts. They can look past things in the charts that other people, they won't see past that noise. They will see the noise, and it'll be hard for them to see the signal. And so really our job as data storytellers is to go through and really bring out the signal as strong as possible and help the audience to easily and clearly see, what's going on in the numbers, and then position them to make a decision.
Yeah, and so this also, I suppose, requires a lot of knowing who you're talking to at different levels. I imagine a startup is, typically they're horizontal organizations. Everybody can talk to anyone. They say below 50 people, typically it's full. You get to have a coffee with the CTO and CEO. Then if you cross that 50 to 100 line, it starts getting a little bit complicated. So you have one level of management. And if we scale that up all the way to an enterprise with 1,000 or more employees across many countries, many regions, then communicating an insight becomes very difficult, because as an analyst now, you don't just need to know the facts and how to analyze it, and you need to have access to good data, which is another huge chapter, assuming that you have good data. You also need to communicate it to your line manager, but also help or liaise that communication process all the way to the decision maker, and who knows where they are in, in the hierarchy. I guess I'm wondering, is there a clear winner when it comes to culture and organizational structure to ensure that we become, as organizations, as collections of people trying to achieve the same goal, we become more flexible, more malleable, more resilient, more easily able to adapt and change what we're doing, or is just a matter of again just telling a story that cuts through all of those layers of abstractions so that we built in enterprises and get to the very top?
Yeah, I mean, data stories are going to work in any kind of culture because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and I still go back to that. Human beings are we're not data storytelling. We're storytelling creatures. We consume and tell stories all the time. Now, in certain cultures, I think data storytelling will flourish more than others. One of those cultures that I think is really works well with data storytelling is a test and learn culture, right? So where people understand that we're constantly learning, from the data. We run tests all the time to see what the results are, and there's probably many stories that come out of that testing that can then be shared throughout the organization. You're going to have a culture in which people want to hear those stories. They want to hear what's new, what's happening. Did we learn anything new about our customers? Did we learn anything new about our business processes? Did we learn anything new about our competitors? Those are the things, in that kind of culture, I think you're going to see an appetite for data stories. But I also think many organizations aren't there yet. They don't have that kind of culture there. And that's, again, I think one of the powers of data storytelling and having data stories shared and having a forum. I guess that's the minimum you have to do. You have to set up a forum. You have to set up a way in which data stories can be shared. But then what does data storytelling do? It does a couple of other things. It raises the data literacy of everybody. If you think with your children, when they were little and we read them bedtime stories, the goal was to get them interested in reading themselves and furthering their literacy level. I think the same thing applies to data storytelling, that as we tell stories within the organization, we're actually elevating everybody's data literacy because they're learning data stories, right? They're hearing data in a context, meaning, and they're,
most natural way.
Yeah, they're experiencing that. And then once we have that data literacy, hand in hand with that also goes curiosity, right? So as we're sharing data stories within an organization, people start to get curious, right? It's like, oh, that was an interesting story about that customer segment. I wonder what stories there are about our customer segment that we focus on. I wonder if we can find and tell data, so it gets people curious within the business about data and what's happening. And so I think in many ways, data storytelling. And here's an example. I had a client that I work with, a very large organization, and my contact at that organization said, Brent, we don't really have a data culture here at our company. We are not, we've got lots of data, but we're not a data culture. And he made an interesting observation. He said, but what we do have is we do have an anecdotal culture, meaning we do rely on a lot of stories within our culture that are based on our founders and our customers and how we've grown as a business. And that really is a powerful part of who we are. And he saw, and this is him speaking, not me, but he said, I think that instilling a data storytelling culture will get us to be more like a data culture, if that makes sense. So a bridge to becoming a data culture for them, he felt, would be to establish a data storytelling culture because they already had the anecdotal, they already had the storytelling actively being done. And what they were missing was the data side. So he was like, I see this as a step towards getting to a more data-driven culture.
Yeah.
By instilling, getting stories told and sharing them within the business.
And perhaps even going through the process of grounding those anecdotes
in
evidence. Right? 'Cause a lot sometimes they're just the thing that Mary said in marketing, and you're like, okay, is it is it true or not? So there's always going to be some sort of process where you face evidence, and that evidence might agree with what you already believe or not. So it could become an insight in itself. The process of validating it. So the story better be a solid story, because otherwise people will run away and go like, no, I don't want to hear that.